SMART stands for Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionized Transportation Program. So this grant program is divided into 2 stages. We want the stage 1 grant that is for planning and prototyping, and that's the stage we're in. If we're successful and compete in stage 2, and if stage 2 funds are available, we can go into the implementation. For now, we are really working on planning this project and working on the prototyping. And that you can consider is like a technology project still in the lab. And stage 2, if we're successful and be able to get stage 2 funding, that will be the implementation. That's when we launch out to benefit the customers. So the next slide, please. I think I just speak to that. And I want to just share with you why we're doing this. So the problem statement is that we have multiple transit providers serving the specialized population, the disabled community, as well as the seniors. We have a pretty robust service in our county. Granted, there's still a lot of needs and a lot of gaps, but from the customer standpoint, it can be confusing for some of the customers who are not familiar with the services. They don't know what services are available to them. Next slide, please. And they don't know, sometimes they don't know who to call. So what we're trying to achieve is really to make it have an integrated data platform to have centralized information. So our customers just need to call one number or go to one website to be able to get the information, and they can get the proper referral to the appropriate service provider who can help them with their trips. So that's kind of the gist of why we're doing that. And Joshua, do you want to take over and explain to us more details of the project?
Okay, so I will take off from here. So this project, for this federal DOT-sponsored project, we are going to set up a centralized open data platform to serve all the accessible transportation riders and to help to improve the service for the accessible transportation providers. So, okay. So this data platform, we will collect data from the service providers or the customer demand, and also the regulation and the policies from the authority organizations. So then the platform will integrate all the data into our open data platform. And on top of this, the open data platform, we are going to develop the several tools. One is the public-facing trip information and referral website, which can provide a one-click information and referral service for the accessible transportation riders. And we try to leverage the AI-powered searching engine to provide more real-time and up-to-date information, and to simplify that process. This how riders can find the preferred trip and the corresponding providers. It can also design a real-time trip information app. This is the conceptual design at stage 1, and that will use the crowdsourcing method to provide the real-time vehicle location information to the riders during their trip. And this platform also proposed a digital mobility management platform, which will be a dashboard to integrate all the all the accessible transportation services across the county, and to make their trip and performance metrics in the dashboard, to make the all the service providers to be able to see their performance and the potential recommendation on this dashboard. Okay. So currently we are, and just now we just had a meeting to our stakeholders, primarily the transportation providers, agencies, organizations. We are trying to collect data, including the static service data and their operational trip records from those providers, and to set up the open data platform to create an ecosystem to establish the data-driven tools, eventually to be the deliverable of the project. And we see after the conversation and the discussion with our stakeholders, including the service providers and some customers, and we see that this project can help, basically from the perspective of the riders. We can provide the one-click, one-stop tool, trip referral and recommendation tool for the riders to better navigate their trip demand, and to provide a user-friendly interface by using AI-based, like an AI-based chatbot, customer service, to make the service more friendly and efficient. And from the perspective of the operator, we are trying to provide a county-wide the accessible transportation performance dashboard for everyone in the ecosystem, to be able to see what the current status and the improvement that this project outcome can bring to all the benefit we can have to be brought by this project deliverables. Okay, that is basically, currently we are trying to speed up our development on the open data platform, and to have set up the concrete connection with the transit providers, and to make the make the deliverable of the project come into a reality as earlier as possible. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Ying, do you have anything else to add?
No, thank you, Joshua. Yeah, we're here to want to share this project with the PCC, and also hear your input on the project, as well as any data requests, that if you have any questions.
All right, do we have any comments from the committee?
I would just like to say, I think this is fantastic. It's a step in the right direction. I love the principle behind it, and particularly having heard at our last PCC meeting that riders don't have technology access for understanding the lay of the land. They don't know where to receive transportation above and beyond paratransit. They can't always communicate effectively with the transit providers without having some other option. I think this meets a lot of needs, and I'm really grateful to the authority for applying for the grant, and congratulations on getting it, and I'm excited to see what comes of it, so thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I have some thoughts, but I don't know how detailed of input we're looking for at this time.
It's up to you. I think you can start, and or we can just do an offline conversation to dive deeper. It's totally up to you.
Thank you. Two things I think I want to mention. One is on one of the slides I saw helped find, select, and potentially book services. That's one of the things that this would do. And I've highlighted for myself here the word potentially book services. I think agreeing with Debbie, liking everything that I'm seeing there, and particularly the ability for people to gather information without needing to do it just by picking up a phone and making a phone call. But then I'm stuck on this word potentially booking services, because I think what my concern would be is that there's this resource that tells you the best way to get from A to B, use these routes and these providers, and then they're stuck at an impasse. They've got this barrier where they still need to go back and pick up the phone and call to schedule a ride with whatever provider it is. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I would ideally love it if all that could be done from just the one place where people are already engaging with this technology to begin with, and that if they could definitely book their rides right while they're in that technology, I think that would be eliminating another barrier for folks.
Do you want to, it's okay if I just quickly respond to that. So first of all, we want to, I know you're very familiar with the situation, the landscape here. We have ADA paratransit service. That is a very intense process. We have our transit agencies that they use, some of them use trapeze paratransit to reserve those trips. We also have providers have services that are a lot simpler, and they may not have the technology to help the customers to book like as you need to go into serve the software. So I think our language here, the potentially book, is pretty accurate. It really depends. Some of the smaller operators may want us to help them get to that step, because they could have a simple fixed route service operated by the city. Then it could be as simple as sharing the information with the customer for this platform. But we could have more complex systems that we are not in a position to book. So that's why we use the word potentially book. And we have a lot of conversations with the transit agencies, and we understand what the boundaries. And I think we will continue to engage them in those conversations and respect the boundaries. But we may have also other providers who may want to use this opportunity to upgrade the system to a more advanced technology-based system.
And the other thing I wanted to ask about is if there's some sort of timeline I know we've got phase 1 and phase 2, but can you put those to months and years on a calendar to lay out a timeline for me?
So phase 1, we started in September 2024. We have 18 months. That's a very tight deadline. Bring us to March 2026. The stage 2 call for project is anticipated in the summer this year. Keep in mind, there are a lot of changes at the federal government, so that is really the best guess. We also, please keep in mind that this, as I mentioned, this is technology in the lab, and since we are engaging our researchers, we are on the same page that it may work, it may not work, right? We don't want to predict the outcome. We definitely are trying our best. So this project does tie to the One Call, One Click Center that CCTA is also developing, and in the ideal case, this will be the brain that brings the integrated data platform to the One Call, One Click Center.
Anybody else? Comments, questions from the committee? Okay, I have a couple. Just at looking at it, and one of the things that it said in the comments that looking towards is, and I know the devil is always in the details, right? But the real-time trip planning, that kind of stuff, and exactly what you had just said, Ying, and I'm thinking about, you've got transit agencies that use Excel to book, you know, their trips, and you've got transit agencies that have massive programs to do that. And I see that as a transit operator, as a teeny tiny little transit operator, you know, looking at real-time trip planning, and I'm like, oh my God, what does that look like? What does that look like for us to integrate with everything else that is going on? And I don't want to be a naysayer, but I look at that and that is really powerful to just even put down as something that this can do. I think it's just so much more complicated than that. And in looking at the way that some of the, even just the presentation is structured, it almost looks like it's promising that as opposed to a potential outcome of it. So I would just kind of, just in the presentation of the information, like looking at it, there's a lot more going on there that needs to happen. And I don't know if, you know, aggregating information into one database is going to solve that. And no one has said that, but it almost, when you look at it, almost seems as if that's going to kind of solve that. It's not, from my perspective, from my limited perspective. The other thing, Ying, you had said this might be a great potential or a great time for agencies to upgrade their systems, right? So if you are working on Excel, maybe you would go and get, and then there's the, where does that, I mean, does this grant, would this grant contribute in some way into providing funds for that? So to bring certain agencies up to a level where they could really participate this and be in part of that integration, right? Because relying on the agencies themselves to fund that isn't always a possibility. And these are, again, just things that I'm kind of throwing out there, but that part really kind of, when you look at the breadth, right, of all the transit agencies that are here and everything that they're doing and all the different amounts of funding. I love that idea, but I think it's something that definitely needs to be considered, right? The resources that each individual agency would have to plug into this giant brain, right? It all kind of needs to be equal in some level, and it's not. And I think that's a big consideration to look at, you know, when putting this, like I said, devil's in the details. So those were my comments there. Any other comments or questions before we move to public comment? Yes, Member Sanders.
Did we see an exhaustive list of all of the transportation that we're aware of that's going to be available as part of this program?
Is that well, I think we did our best. I think we cover everyone, but I think we might leave something because you don't know things you don't know.
Is it everything that we know as of today?
Yes.
Second question. As to the funding for the transportation doers, the actual facilitators of the transportation, and their software, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it? A software issue?
No, the Automat doesn't cover the software cost. We have to figure out an interface of how for now we understand it's an output from the software, the data that we're looking for.
You're telling me that we're just not there yet? We're not at that stage yet where we're looking at particular software, we're just looking at putting people together?
No, that's not in the scope of this project.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Is that all from the committee? And I would like to say that there's no one software that every transit agency is using. Each transit agency uses their own.
Well, I thought that you made that abundantly clear. The question in my mind is, how realistic are we being about moving all of these different agencies into a software that can coordinate? Now, we saw already that health insurance agencies or health providers have had great difficulty in doing that. And we're trying to do something along the same lines, that is, integrate into one system so that individual users can contact a central authority and, in doing so, receive direction to the type of, to satisfy their particular need.
I actually, Joshua has a really good example of using the airline. We're not trying to integrate the software, but there's a good example that he used earlier.
Yeah, so we are not going to integrate all the the scheduling software and the booking platform software, taking over those things from the current agencies. This is a database on top of the service of each providers. So this is only about trip information and referral. I just use an example of the either Google Flight or Expedia to booking a flight trip, right? So this is not, we are not going to take over the software of each airline company like a United or Delta. They're just still running their operation software, scheduling, dispatching, and the service. But we just want to establish a first stop trip information and referral service.
The project, though, seems to assume that each end of the spectrum is going to have to be able to communicate with the other. That is the central authority that you're proposing, to which the users will communicate, seeking the assistance, will need to be able to somehow quickly communicate with the providers. Isn't that correct?
The project is envisioned in a way that we think having the integrated information is helpful for the passengers without necessarily have to integrate each provider's software if they all use software or their, say, Excel spreadsheet. So this is how the project is envisioned, and we think is practical and it serves the purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the committee before we go to the public? Okay. If anyone from the public would like to speak, please raise your hand, your virtual hand, or staff and I will call on you. Doesn't look like we have anybody in the audience. Deanna, have we received any written, in-person, or remote public comments?
We have not received any written in-person or remote comments.
So the next item is a review item presented by Rashida regarding the AAC draft bylaws and Accessibility Advisory Committee, thereby sunsetting the PCC and establishing the CCTA as the coordinating entity as recommended by the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan.
Thank you, Chair Clark and PCC members. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be before you today to give you this update on the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, the Coordinated Entity OAE implementation, and the governance update. I hope everyone is doing well. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. So today's objectives is to update on the status of the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, the ATSP, its coordinating entity, the Office of Accessibility and Equity, which is popularly known as the OAE. A review of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, the AAC roles, the draft bylaws, the membership composition, and the establishment of the AAC and the coordinating entity. And also a quick review of the timeline and the next steps. Some of this information is a little bit redundant because we have brought ATSP updates to the PCC before, but we wanted to just kind of wrap it up in a nice bow. So we talk about empowering mobility and enhancing lives. That's the vision of the Office of Accessibility and Equity. When this project first started, one of the things that CCTA did was to hire a program manager for this Office of Accessibility and Equity. That'll be yours truly. So the mission was to promote and support the provision and the coordination of a comprehensive, integrated, person-centered, user-friendly, and seamless accessible transportation systems. The idea was to rely on the best practices, adopt plans while ensuring equitable and effective access to transportation for our elderly persons and persons with disabilities in Contra Costa County. The rationale for launching the OAE, as many remember, was born of the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan and its study. What everyone was looking for in that study was a systemic change in the operation and the rollout of services, and even the discovery of the need of services and the gaps that are in services. So by launching this, there were 3 prior studies, and within those 3 prior studies, the difference between this study and the previous study were the action items that were taken. Some of the action items that were taken was the establishment of the ATSP working group, which is made up of several members in the transportation community, including nonprofit, some of our elected officials, and also transit operators. What we did was review the actual establishment of a coordinated entity, and also we took a look at, how will this coordinated entity be governed? But most importantly, how can we establish or embed this change in oversight when it came to transportation services in Contra Costa County in Contra Costa Transportation's framework, and to partner with our transit agencies? And that's when we've come up with the AAC bylaws. So bylaws have been developed for the new Accessible Advisory Committee, AAC. And just to mention, the reason why we went with the AAC meaning Accessible Advisory Committee, the purpose of that, as was mentioned as our last ATSP, was to make sure that it was all-inclusive. With the Paratransit Coordinating Council, most of what we look at, 99% of what we look at or review, has to do with paratransit. The idea of the Accessible Advisory Committee was to look at all accessible transportation services in Contra Costa County. So it will, the idea of the AAC was to bolster the current Paratransit Coordinating Council and address all accessible transportation needs, not just paratransit. So it'll include updates to our current PCC bylaws with the OAE's mission, some new definition of terms, the purpose, the membership, the process for new representation and how appointments are made, duties and responsibilities, and also policies for AAC officers, meetings, including subcommittees. For those of you on the PCC who have participated in subcommittees before, sometimes it has proven to be extremely difficult based on some of our current composition and even the timing of our meetings to get in front of items, to review items through subcommittees. Sometimes it has been extremely challenging. So some of those were actually addressed in the AAC bylaws. So the launch of the ATSP coordinated entity is in development with ongoing input from several factors. And those factors have been the PCC. And I must reiterate that the PCC is made up of several stakeholders. Also the working group. The working group is also made up of several stakeholders, from nonprofit stakeholders to riders to the operators, big and small. The task force is also made up of a similar body. And so there has been a collaboration from the inception of the Accessible Transportation Strategic Plan, from the study to some of the program rollouts, to the discussion of the coordinated entity, and also to the establishment of the draft bylaws. The purpose of all of these groups was to foster collaboration and also healthy dialogue when it came to how to properly roll out this service. the idea of ADA transportation services and paratransit transportation services, we have been operating on a certain bedrock and certain regulations and rules for over 30 years. And there hasn't not necessarily been a change and a diversion in which some of these systems are operated. They have some very strict rules and guidelines, and so it's made it very difficult to roll out different types of services that don't meet these guidelines. One expression was given to me, everybody seems to say, oh, the transit operators can't do this, that, and the other. Well, they operate under certain rules and guidelines, and so they are not the answer for everything. They certainly don't have the funding for everything. So being able to collaborate with them, identify gaps in service, create programs in collaboration with our existing experts and resources has been the bedrock of what we've been doing for the past 2 years. So some of the things that we agreed on as we were establishing this is that, and the reason why I said that we agreed on, because this has also been brought up in the working group and the task force, is rolling out CCTA to serve as a coordinating entity. For the past year and a half, CCTA has been acting as a proxy coordinated entity, so to speak. They have been collaborating with the transit agencies to roll out 3 very successful programs and projecting more. The CE will be a new Office of Accessibility and Equity housed within CCTA, and will have ties to the AAC and the CCTA board. A new Accessible Advisory Committee will serve as a bolstered PCC to advise the OAE and CCTA on accessible transportation. The progress so far includes drafting of the AAC bylaws, clarifying its purpose, membership, and authority, further developing the guiding principles for collaboration of CCTA, and this will include the operators, nonprofits, and other accessible transportation partners. The launching of the HESP coordinated entities in development with ongoing input of the various groups that I mentioned earlier. So where we are now. On December 2nd, the HESP task force approved the draft bylaws and recommended that the draft bylaws be approved by the board. The AAC will guide the AAC will be the guide in which it replaces the PCC with enhanced functions and responsibilities. So CCTA will formally become the coordinated entity through a resolution. Some of the roles and responsibilities, if you look at the makeup of the PCC, this should actually be in your packet. What we've done is that we've put side by side the makeup of the PCC and also some enhanced focuses on the AAC. I won't go through all of them. In addition to that, we have the membership. It's important that I state that the membership, we spent a lot of time on the membership. We spent a lot of time on the membership for several reasons. We already have a PCC that has several represented agencies, and we wanted to make sure that that equity of representation was also with the AAC. At the last task force meeting, which was December 2nd, we presented the draft to the ATSP task force, and there were several comments. This was not actually the first time throughout this process of a year and a half, especially with 2024. There have been comments made by different stakeholders regarding the draft AAC bylaws. Some of the comments were given to us by PCC members. As I mentioned earlier, the PCC members is made up of several stakeholders, both nonprofits and also the operators. Comments have been made and feedback has been given through the ATSP working group. The working group is also made up of nonprofit writers and also operators. And then we've also had working meetings, especially working meetings with the transit operators, and also some working meetings with the nonprofits and the county to go over some of this. All of this happened before the December 2nd ATSP meeting. And then after the December 2nd my apologies, after the December 2nd ATSP meeting, or I should say at the December 2nd ATS meeting, we received further comments regarding the AAC bylaws draft. And those bylaws drafts have also been incorporated where possible in the draft that you see before you today. So you may ask, what does this mean for the PCC and the next steps? We are here today for the PCC to review the bylaws for any clarification, notes, or concerns. PCC members whose seats are represented in the memberships will need to be appointed to the AAC by their membership agencies. If the board approves this transition, the next steps will include each representative membership group a period of time, either 30 days or 60 days, to notify CCTA of their intent to recommend a member for their represented agency. Member representatives will be ratified by the board, and it needs to be submitted for the appointment. And then once that is done, a date will be set for the first AAC meeting. The first AAC meeting will include an election of a chair and a vice chair, and recommendations for the first work plan for the next fiscal year will be brought to the AAC. This is some of the timeline. This is the projection of what we expect to happen in regards to that. Before I get to questions, there were a couple of points that I wanted to kind of reiterate regarding this particular process. As of now, what we're asking the PCC committee to do is to review the draft AAC bylaws, provide comments, ask questions, and input regarding the approval of the ATSP task force recommendation to the board to approve not only the draft bylaws, but establish CCTA as the OAE. The other things that we want to bring to the PCC's attention is that we have received, we've started to receive comments regarding the draft bylaws that are currently there. It's important to note that as we have received comments, we want to make sure that we review these comments and address these concerns. So some of the other things to take of note is that some of the comments have already been addressed in the current bylaws that you see. The membership that is defined in the bylaws is actually consistent with the PUC 9923 requirements, and the process for filling vacancies and selecting officers is also consistent with the PCC bylaws. It's also important to note that inclusive representation beyond paratransit is what's being offered by the AAC. We want to be able to take a holistic approach at accessible transportation, encompassing all modes of transit, not just paratransit. And this process ensures that the voices of individuals with diverse mobility needs are actually heard and considered in the shaping of equitable and comprehensive transportation systems. A concern that was brought up previously was the active participation of elected board officials. It's important to note that by including elected officials or their representatives on the AAC, the committee ensures that policymakers are actively involved in the development of accessible transportation programs, not just merely approving budgets or funding some after decisions. This proactive involvement bridges the gap between planning and policymaking. And what it does, we believe that it fosters a stronger alignment with community priorities. By enhancing the PCC without duplication, we're strengthening the Paratransit Coordinating Council. It doesn't mean duplicating the work of existing transit operators. Instead, it emphasizes the collaboration and coordination. In the past year and a half, that's all we've been doing, is how do we collaborate with our existing resources, our existing knowledge, and also our existing best practice. The AAC and the OAE are designed to work closely with transit operators, complementing their efforts while leveraging their expertise and resources. We want to ensure that transit operators, as mentioned in previous presentations, they have what we have deemed the right of first refusal. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So the establishment of the AAC respects the vital role of transit operators in accessible transportation projects, giving them a first look at some of these initiatives, especially since we've done so the past year and a half. This approach promotes efficiency, it reduces redundancy, and allows for seamless integration of new accessible programs into existing operations. Lastly, advancing the accessibility through collaboration, the OAE and AAC represents a commitment to accessible and equitable transportation for all Contra Costa residents. It's driven by collaboration between transit agencies, elected officials, and community stakeholder. This unified approach ensures accountability, maximizes resources, and builds trust between government, operators, and the communities that they serve. And with that, I'll be more than happy to take questions.
Thank you, Rashida. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Member Sanders.
Bill Churchill submitted his thoughts. Any comments in connection with those thoughts?
If I may, were you looking for a staff to, I do have a comment.
To you. I'm looking to you.
Oh, yes. Bill Churchill, along with other transit operators, have submitted their thoughts. The response to that is that we've taken those thoughts into consideration. This is actually not the first time that they have offered some recommendations, and in the past, those recommendations have been taken into consideration and are presented in this current draft. We will be accepting, and the purpose of this particular meeting is for the review and comments, and so we will be taking their updated comments along with any updated comments from the current PCC in order to review, potentially edit before it's pushed forward to the board.
A couple of those comments were fairly scathing. Have you taken any steps to address those particular points that he makes? And it's not just Mr. Churchill, it's three different agencies that signed up for that letter.
Correct. This particular one has just been taken into consideration only because it's been a couple of days. It was submitted a few days before this particular meeting, so not as of yet. But some of them have already been addressed and answered in my comments and my presentation. Whatever has not been addressed, the idea is that the transit agencies make up the PCC. They've also made up the Accessible Transportation Task Force, and they also make up the working group. And so there have been several opportunities from different stakeholders to have reviewed what we currently have before you. And so after today's meeting, we will take all the comments, not just the transit operators, in consideration before moving things forward.
In other words, you're not asking us to act on the proposal today. You're saying to study it.
Correct. This has been approved by the ATSP task force, but before we move it forward, the idea is that we wanted to bring it to the PCC first to actually also review, and that if they have comments or concerns, for us to be able to address those before pushing it forward.
One last thought. Would you like to address the concern that he expressed, or that the three expressed, about political versus what one would hope is objective decision-making?
I would almost say, because we do have those people here that did, make those comments. I don't know if maybe they wanted to readdress those comments and have Rashida address them specifically, because then that way she could speak specifically to that.
That's fine with me.
Does that?
Maybe
Member Thompson.
I'll start. I am one of the signers on the letter, so I will start. I think one of the things I think we should clarify is that, yes, the ATSP task force did move this forward. It moved it forward with the transit operators abstaining from the vote across the board. None of them voted to move it forward at that stage for the exact reasons that are outlined in the letter. We don't feel that a number of those have been addressed. We brought up a number of concerns at the task force meeting on December 2nd. We have not had a meeting since then. There's been no follow-up other than what's presented in your packet today. So I personally don't feel that I'd be comfortable with PCC moving this forward. They are asking for action today to move it forward. To clarify, this would be the last PCC, this would be the process to disband the PCC and to move it forward to the AAC. We are approving draft bylaws that are not finalised. Again, that's what the ATS task force did at the last meeting. They've changed since then, so they've changed since they were approved by that task force. We're being asked to approve them again today in a different format, with which we received on Friday afternoon, little chance to review. We're being asked to move that forward today. So I think there's a lot to think through when we're talking about this and going through this. And I'm going to let John address some of the individual comments. I mean, John Sanderson actually authored a lot of what's in the document. Well, the general manager signed off on it, but he did a lot of the background to kind of do the research to look at that. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I think very well said, Rob. There are a number of problems, as Member Thompson said. Yes, the ATSP task force did approve or endorse or something the bylaws with no operator support, and in fact with a no vote from BART. In fact, I believe that we had to check with the board clerk to see if there was enough of a quorum present for the motion to pass. So of those in attendance, there was. If we counted everybody, there wasn't. It was close. I would also just like to say, we're talking about the bylaws. This is not a motion for one thing being the bylaws. This is a motion for three things. The establishment of 2CTA as the coordinating entity, okay, fine idea, but that's one thing. The establishment of the AAC to take the place of the PCC, we can talk about elected members later, that's another thing. The establishment of the AAC and the establishment of 2CTA as the CE are not the same thing, and I think it's disingenuous to consider them as one item. And then the bylaws themselves, I don't understand why the bylaws have to be finalized before the committee that they apply to comes into existence. Bylaws for a Brown-acted public committee are a big deal. They're proto-legislation. They're not easy to change. And in fact, the procedure to change the bylaws that is in this latest draft is actually very, very difficult. So yeah, I think there's a lot here. And we haven't had a real chance to discuss it. We did have one opportunity in September to put in some comments on a previous version that was substantially different from this one. We put in comments. Most of the comments that we put in at that time were just disappeared in the next version, which was the version that was presented to the ATSP task force on December 2nd. That was passed, okay. Now we're presented with a third new document. This is not the same document as was presented to the task force on December 2nd. It has a lot in common, but it has been heavily edited. I don't know who's been involved in the editing process, but it does seem to me that if this committee is going to vote to replace itself with a new committee, that maybe this committee should have a working group that has a hand in redrafting the bylaws, or in making that decision, or in making a recommendation about that decision. None of that has happened. So, yeah, at this point, no, this is a big problem, and that's not even getting into the amount of this document, most of the definition section, some other sections, is very, very heavy on what I would call editorial commentary. It's not specific to the committee shall operate in this way. It's not specific to what the election of officers is going to look like. It's talking about historical reasons for things going back, in some cases, decades, which, okay, maybe that fits in a staff report, but why does it have to be included in the actual bylaws? That just, to me, it seems, I don't know, it's needless, and I worry that it will lead to trouble down the way. Lastly, with regard to the electeds, I understand the thought that including the elected board members on the PCC itself will give the actions of the PCC an added layer of recognition, and will make sure the board members understand what the PCC is up to and sort of bring them closer together. And that makes a certain amount of sense to me. However, I will say, as professional staff at an agency, if I'm sitting on this committee with 4 elected politicians, city council members, mayors, supervisors, if they like an idea, I cannot, in any kind of good conscience or self-preservation, I cannot oppose an idea publicly that my potential future board members are in favor of, publicly, in the same meeting. And that is why the transit representatives at the ATSP task force who did have board members present abstained from the vote rather than voting no. Because if you vote no on something that your boss's boss's boss is really in favor of, you are gonna hear about it. So with that, I just would say, speaking only for my seat, County Connection cannot approve this, this motion at this time. Thank you.
If I may.
Thank you for that comment. Yes, if staff wants to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Member Sanderson. I think I just wanted to be able to respond that part of the ask for today is to review this current draft. And so I think there is an opportunity, that's why the first word in the staff report says review. There is an opportunity for us to be able to review this. I don't know if I have anything to say regarding elected officials and staff. I would think that all staff members are supposed to be acting in the best interest or of our elected officials, and it includes our comprehensive thoughts and best practice ideas that, I don't know, may not necessarily align with our elected official, but I thought that our elected officials were relying on us to be the subject matter experts on some of what we have going on. But I could have a different take on that, and I certainly respect that thought. But the purpose of today's meeting is to grant an opportunity to look at. The reason why the document is modified is because there were several things brought up at the December 2nd meeting that has been brought up in the modified version that you see in front of you today. So there is an opportunity at this particular meeting. And you're right, with everything going on, we weren't able to post this until almost the very, very last minute. Our sincere apologies. And so being able to review this so that we can take those comments and concerns, including the one that came in public comment, but also give everybody else at the table an opportunity to review it. If we have those reviews, those comments and concerns, and we look at them, we're more than happy to come back to this body with those concerns. What we have found, though, and the reason why there was a healthy debate at the December 2nd ATSP is because, well, how do we move forward? Do we want to continue to stay with the status quo? Do we not want change? Do we not appreciate the idea of, kind of collaborating? Because CCTA's goal, which we assume is everybody's goal, not only is the rider, but sustainability of the services that we currently provide for them, plus the expansion of the services that we could provide for our users. And so, we certainly don't want to get into a us against them type of scenario. That's not the goal here. If there are questions and concerns, as they were in December 2nd, those comments were addressed. Yes, you do see a different one because some of those comments indeed were addressed, and you also see a different one on December 2nd from the one that was presented in September. So some comments were brought up against those also. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying that we have taken a look at this, and today's presentation of its current draft is to be able to receive comments. And I do have other staff people there. If anybody else wants to add to what I've originally said, you can certainly feel free to do so.
If no staff want to make a comment, I'll go to Member Toth and then back to Member Sanderson.
Okay, thank you, Rashida. So the bylaws that are before us today incorporate the feedback that was given by the ATSP. This process has been going on for a year and a half. Further delays in this process are just a repeat of the 30 years of history of studying what's wrong, publishing a report on what's wrong, and then doing nothing to fix it. We are at a time, it's the first time ever in the history of Contra Costa County that the Transportation Authority is taking a significant interest in people with disabilities and elders and wanting to create a person-centered system that meets the need of all residents of Contra Costa County, not just the providers of transportation and their systems. I, for one, was offended by the public comment letter, felt that it was an personal attack on the Transportation Authority in the process. To say that we've had 3 meetings when we've had a year and a half of meetings at the accessible strategic plan, at the workforce task force level, we have had multiple meetings, multiple conversations, and they all should be happening in a public forum, not behind closed doors. And so these have been public, noticed meetings with conversations, input opportunities, and to act like it's new and to address CCTA as though they're doing something circumvent is offensive. It also stagnates the process, which is the history of what is wrong with why we haven't fixed anything in this county. We are at a point now where we have bylaws that look at putting elders and people with disabilities at the center of what we do. And that has to be our North Star. The fact that this body, we took a year and a half to develop exactly who should be on this body, and learned at the last meeting, the Accessible Transportation Task Force, that the transit providers were abstaining or saying no. Bob Franklin came to me at the end of the meeting and said, I never would have voted no if we could have just simply, for the one reason, we need BART and we need AC Transit. Look on the bylaws. There's BART and there's AC Transit. His opposing was that there was a body, East Bay Paratransit, that was a consortium, didn't represent the voice of AC Transit or BART. So that was heard, that was changed. So the updated bylaws are nothing but a reflection of the feedback that has been given by everybody in a public process who has been part of this. I, for one, am absolutely open. Let's discuss it. What needs to be changed to have people support it? What I can tell you is it's not going to be reducing the number of writers who have a voice in this process. Because we have people who are blind, we have people who are deaf, we have people who use wheelchairs, we have people who use power chairs, we have people with developmental disabilities, we have people with Alzheimer's disease. We have such a wide variety of needs, and people who can take paratransit and people who don't qualify for paratransit because they don't live within 3/4 of a mile or a mile and a half of a fixed route stop. So we are not just talking about paratransit. The whole point of this is to look at the ecosystem. Where are the gaps? Where is County Connection closed? From what time are they closed? And who needs to go to church during that time? Or Bethel Island, or any other example. If we do not start addressing this as an entire ecosystem and we just make this about transit providers, then we are failing the people in our community. I want to hear from the transit providers. I want to hear what their problems are with it so that we can fix and address those issues. But it's certainly not watering down who we have decided over a year and a half needs to be at the table to have a voice in the process. What this does, these bylaws expand who it is that has a voice, makes it accessible to those to come to the meetings, makes it a much more rigorous process, and is much more person-focused. So I read through all the pages of redlining and the removal of representatives from here, as well as a bunch of other stuff. There's a history to why we are where we are. And that history needs to be a part of whatever we do moving forward so we don't go back. I feel very strongly that we need to all have a look at this, have our say, figure out what are the make or breaks in this, because this puppy needs to move forward. We are not going to continue to be okay with people not being able to get where they need to go and being institutionalized, becoming homeless, and losing jobs because we have a transportation system that fails them. So I'm wanting to hear what the make or break deal is for folks, because this really does need to be all of us on board. This is not a we them, but it's turning into that, and it's unfortunate, and it feels very, I don't know, I was offended. So I don't understand why all the vitriol. For the first time ever, we have staff at CCTA that are writing grants and getting funding and up for solving the problem. They want to be the coordinated entity. They want to see this work move forward. So John, let's break it into 3. CCTA being the CE, AAC becoming the PC and the bylaws. However you want to do that, let's break it up and do it. How do we move forward with this? Have people's voices heard, make sure that AC Transit and BART both have their voices. So how do we do that? Because I'm here for solutions and to move forward, because we're not going to stay with status quo. It's not happening. Those are my comments.
I don't think we have any objection to shaking up the status quo. The objection is to shaking up the status quo somewhere off camera, and then the solution gets brought back to us as a done deal tied up with a ribbon. Yeah, all that history is true. And I will say, regarding the membership, I don't think there's anything wrong with the membership proposed in this latest set of bylaws, with the exception of the elected representatives. I really do believe that's a problem. But in terms of the consumers on the commission, I think that's great. Let's do that.
Can we get it back on the screen just so we can see it on the screen? Can we get the link up on the screen?
I know, Ibarra, you had a comment as well. I'd like to hear that one, and then we can move.
One more thing I wanted to say, though.
Sure.
And that is that, yes, I think we are being asked to review and give comments. However, given the fact that this is not the same document as was presented on December 2nd to the ATSP task force, it is pretty clear to me that this is our opportunity to give comments which may or may not be fully incorporated. Some of the comments that were brought up on December 2nd were incorporated, others were not. This is our one opportunity to do that, and then once we've done it, that's it. This is not a request that we review and give comments. This is a request that we approve and forward for final approval to the 2 CTA board. And that's Again, not the same thing. Thank you.
Ibarra?
Thank you. I think that it does make good sense to think about this in terms of three separate conversations, although it's presented as one kind of agenda item for these three separate approvals. That, I don't know if thinking about that as three separate things could help us move forward in some way, but I would support doing that. I'm sorry to hear that the providers opted out of participating during the task force and working group conversations for whatever reasons. I was hearing a lack of, that their votes were not being made and that they weren't speaking up because of other people that were in the room.
My apologies if I was unclear. No, what happened was that they abstained from the vote from this dais. They were part of the conversation. They just voted present rather than yay or nay.
Okay. And I haven't had the opportunity to follow all those meetings and cross-reference each comment that was outlined in this letter that was presented on Friday, and sort of track, what has been addressed and what hasn't been addressed in the draft of the bylaws that we're reviewing currently. But overall, it feels a little bit, as I read this letter, that the providers are, the transportation providers writing the letter are kind of protecting their stake in the matter. It feels, it feels like slowing down the process, blocking the process in some kind of way. And there's one sentence in here in particular, it's under the AAC bylaws paragraph, maybe like the second to the last sentence. As written, the bylaws would endow the AAC with considerable authority to reshape countywide strategic, operational, and funding priorities for accessible transportation while drastically reducing the voice of the transit operators and other accessible transportation providers. And I think, when I read that, I think, yes, that's what we want. I mean, isn't that the intention? That would certainly be my goal. I think in this letter, it feels like that's presented as though that's a bad thing. But in my view, I think that expansion to this AAC is a positive step that I would like to see happen. And that's the end of my comment.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone on the committee?
I want to follow up with Rashida. I was at the transportation meeting, Accessible Transportation Task Force, when we had the conversation, the second conversation about the bylaws, and there was feedback given. And I did not do a tracking, as John mentioned, of what was requested versus what was changed. Did you? Do you have a red line tracking document? Can you address what suggestions were made and what suggestions were incorporated? Because it's not some behind-the-scenes process to have a public meeting, take feedback, and then provide updates at the next meeting. That's the process of how it works. You review a document, you receive feedback, staff update it, and staff send it out. And that's what happened. I feel like all these conversations need to happen in public, and I feel like they finally are. I don't know, obviously, you guys have some consortium going on behind the scenes to write this letter, but I think that the public process for this is happening here. I just want to see, I want to see what recommendations were made and what were incorporated. Do you have that, Rashida?
So what we can, yes, we do. We also have the video of the December, we have a recording of the December 2nd meeting. And we also have the original document that was given to the ATSP, plus the items that were brought up at the ATSP. And there are definitely more significant items brought up at this redlined comment than they were brought at the ATSP. So yes, it'll definitely look significantly different, but there's certainly a lot of the comments that are brought up in this red line document that were not mentioned at the last December 2nd public meeting. What we could do is that we can definitely provide both documents so that, and of course, the the YouTube video, the recording is made public, so each member here has access to it and can definitely go and watch it. And we can also provide the original document that was given to the task force is also online because it's part of the agenda packet. For those of you that participate in the task force, you already should have a copy of it. And then you'll see where some of the items were clearly brought up. So no, this document was not supposed to look exactly like the document that was brought up December 2nd. It's going to look different because there were comments that were brought up at the December 2nd meeting. And once again, this particular meeting is for the purpose of looking at this document and making comments. I had mentioned in my presentation that if we have to uh, take the comments and concerns of this particular meeting and address them. And even if we have to call a special meeting of the PCC to review whatever has been brought to this meeting as a final document before pushing forward, that is definitely something that we are willing to do from a staff perspective, if that is the recommendation of this current PCC.
Member Thompson.
So I think just in that regard, and to speak to something that Member Toad said, I think that would have been a helpful process at the ATSP task force if that would have come back to another meeting, because it feels like, yes, it went to that task force. There's now changes being presented to the document to a completely different set of people with different set of comments. It would have made more sense if that whole conversation would have happened within the ATSP task force process. So there should have been another meeting to address that. It shouldn't have been voted on. It should have been presented for comments. Comments come back, changes made, changes presented again, and then move forward. That hasn't happened in this case.
I'm just going to second that. That's kind of where I was at, was, okay, so they were presented, there was lots of comments made, there were changes made. Where was there the next step of those, okay, we integrated all our, you had all your comments, so we've made changes based on those comments, we're going to present that back. Okay, this is the document that we're now going to take to the PCC. That was actually kind of a question that I had about that, because I also have that question, if we had tons of comments or changes, requests, would that then be made and then we would never see it again, and then it would take into CCTA, and then that happens? And we don't know if those had been addressed or not, or we weren't, have the opportunity at least to say, hey, we tried to address it, this is how we did it, you know, the whole, we all come together and say, okay, well, it all didn't get addressed, but this is acceptable. Like, you know, we can all work forward with that and move forward with that. That was kind of my first instinct with that. And that is what I am also hearing.
I could just add on one other thing. I think there's been a comment made that transit operators are going to hold this back. We're trying to get the process right. I wasn't involved 30 years ago. I've been around for 18 years. I haven't been involved in this kind of task force that amount of time. You've got different people at the table. We're trying to get this across the board, but you can't do it. We're not doing it to hold it up. We're not doing it to stop it. We're trying to do the right process. If that takes a little bit longer, I'm sorry, that takes a little bit longer. This feels like it's being rushed through. The ATSP task force was rushed through. Yes, it was a 1.5-year process. Maybe it should have been a 2-year process. What's the harm in getting the process right, doing the right things, getting the right people in the room, everyone in agreement, instead of rushing through a process that doesn't have consensus?
Please, Member Smith, Vice Chair Smith.
I've really enjoyed this. This has been what I would call a very good family dialogue. You know, families never agree 100% on anything. But in the end, we always come together and we work for the common good of the family. And I think that's where we are now. I think this AAC is something, when I first came on the council, the PCC, my first few meetings I believe I raised the question, why aren't there better coordination among transit agencies? And we're coming to that point now. And I think we're at a point now, especially with the comments I've heard here today, people are bringing their genuine concerns to the table, and people are beginning to listen. And I think it's been suggested, all we need to do now is to put all of these comments together, sift them out, come up with the most workable and the most agreeable, and bring it back. Let us vote it up or down, and let's get on with this. And let's not take another year to do this.
If I may?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Smith. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. As I mentioned, definitely review for comments. Just to address the input that was given to the ATSP, the updates that were made, a subsequent meeting with the ATSP to ensure that the inputs were addressed, duly noted. I think there is an opportunity to course correct that. So just to put a thought out there about what the PCC could do today, is take the document to be able to review it. We can certainly email the PCC what was presented at the December 2nd ATSP task force for you to clearly see some of the updates that were made. And also there could be a review of the comments that were made by the public comment letter that came from the transit operators, plus any additional comments that members of the PCC could make. And we could convene a special meeting next month to look at the comments and concerns that have been brought up with a new revised document for review.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Member Sanderson?
I was actually going to offer a motion when we get there, but.
I have a couple, yeah. Do we
Please.
have anybody, before a motion, do we have any other questions or comments from the committee? Yes.
So I have a
Member Toth.
process question. Are we separating this into 3 puppies?
Haven't gotten there yet. Working on just some comments at the moment.
Through the chair, that was going to be part of my suggestion.
Okay. So I actually just have some questions about that, because I had some questions about that. Which is, there's no vote here. There's no actual action to be taken, but we are reviewing potentially approving bylaws, and making a decision to sundown the PCC and adopt the AAC. Shouldn't that be a vote? Does that?
I mean, it says that we're being asked to approve the recommendation.
But there's no action item on this. This is kind of where I'm at. It's not presented as an action item. Am I wrong in that, though? No. Am I reading that incorrectly? Okay. All right. So that's kind of one of my comment is I do think that this should be an action item for the board. But
May I suggest we
Yeah.
ask our clerk to help us with that question?
ask who?
Ask Terrian.
The recommendation does say that staff requests review of the AAC bylaws and approval of the recommendation of the ATSP to the authority board to approve the draft AAC bylaws. I believe that this is written in a way where there could be action taken today. Depending upon how the conversation was going to go, whether the review, is going to be reviewed. If the body felt that it was at a point where it could approve the recommendation, then that is part of this. The motion could also be made that this be brought back.
So we can make a motion on it because there's no. Okay, yeah, and to separate. So I had, then I'm just gonna have a couple of questions. Again, looking through, and thank you, Rashida, for letting us know, and I did want to acknowledge that, they went out on Friday, we're here on Monday. I'll be real honest, I didn't do an incredibly thorough review, there's been a lot going on. So in my comment, I'd love to be able to just have a little more time to really review it, and not to stop it, you know what I mean? I think, but again, to just kind of review it, look at it. And as a provider, I have people that I need to talk to about what that means. So it's going from a meeting every other month to a meeting every month. I have people I need to talk to about that. Even if it's just to have the time to inform them that that's what's happening, that's what's moving on, and to take in their comments as an employee of an agency that provides paratransit. So that was just one of my comments, again, of just having a little more time to be able to absorb that and go back. And I don't know if people have to go back to boards to say that, if people have to go, I don't know if there's budget adjustments for that. Like, I don't know what that looks like for everybody on this, but that's one thing for me that I would love to have a little more time to be able to go back and do that. Because, again, as a smaller agency, I'm doing dispatching, I'm driving, whatever it is that it takes. So it may not seem like a lot, but being in a meeting 11 times a year as opposed to 5 or 6 times a year is an impact to the program. Sure. Because I'm number 2, right, in providing that actual service. So I would also like time to be able to go back to my group and my staff and say, okay, guys, this is what it's doing. Look at all these great things that we'll be doing and all this support, but this is what this means. And I'd like to be able to go back and do that. And I think sometimes they have some valuable input that might be able to come forward to that. So those were the comments that I wanted to make about that, about the potential of requesting some more time to review. And I think then also to review all the comments that have been made here and kind of take that in. Member Toth.
So I think we have people here from the public who want to comment on the item, and so I don't know if we separate out and do things, because that would be making a motion before we heard from public comment. So I'd rather, I don't know if, I don't know the point of order there, but.
I was just making the comments. I was going to go down and ask for the public after that before a motion.
Before we do, okay.
A motion, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Member Sanders.
A couple of comments. First of all, bylaws, the comment earlier that someone made that bylaws are jurisdictional. It's true. Second, I can well understand, it makes sense to me that members of this group who need to go back to their superiors for authority, that simply makes a lot of sense. It also makes a great deal of sense, given the longevity of the history of this matter, that we move as expeditiously as possible. I suggest that whatever you do, that it give us at least a week to 10 days to read over the bylaws, the new proposed bylaws, so that we can try to make some sense of them, and even better if it was 2 weeks. As one member of the committee, I do not mind coming in the extra time and giving you folks whatever time, whatever additional time you need, or effort on my part to help in the analysis. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we're just going to do comments right now. I'm going to move to public comments, and then we can go to motions if nobody else has, and thanks for that, so we can make that clarification. Any other comments from the board before we move to public comments? Okay. If anyone from the public would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand, and staff or I will call upon you. Do we have anybody? Okay, Deanna, have we received any written, in-person, or remote public comment?
We have received a joint public comment from the County Connection, Tri-Delta, and WestCat, which was provided to the committee this morning, which we've been discussing. We also have another speaker card from Nora Lewis. We have someone who would like to speak, Tyler Bohan.
Thank you.
Okay, and you'll have 3 minutes up here at the mic. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Tyler Bohan. I'm a Senior Specialty Ambassador representing Full Circle of Choices. on the Transportation Council group per the DD Council with via Ibarra. I'd like to start by saying that I find these sentiments by the transit agencies disappointing, to say the least. For example, I learned about the County Connection scheduling desk not too long ago from a man sitting outside of a BART station, which is now a tool that I have come to use quite often and I find very useful. I did not learn about this through their website or through an email or a public address or a public service announcement. And I'd like to point out that, you know, accessibility is a right, not an option. And it doesn't just mean physically accessible. It also means navigable websites, phone numbers being listed. That's why I'm very excited, you know, about this Optimat project. I really think we could use something like that, considering that Google Maps already, I think, uses similar tools. You know, how hard could that be? You know, many of these transit organizations evolved with the internet and integrated with websites, but I haven't seen much change as far as upgrading their software or integrating further with more modern tools since then. I think it's time that, you know, they evolve. And as a person with an IDD who relies on public transportation a lot, I am excited about these tools and this initiative. As Council Member Toth, you said, and I really appreciated, diversity. The diversity of our community and the diversity of our disabled community requires an effort, requires, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Requires a little more attention, I'd say. I hope that these transit agencies will ultimately choose to stand together with us and support us rather than continue to stay the same. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have another public comment.
We do have another public comment. Nicola Frazier.
Hello, everyone. I am Nicola. I work for an organization that serves several persons with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and many of them use public transportation. Now, I want to emphasize the importance of accessible and inclusive transportation for individuals with IDDs and the other underserved populations. Reliable transportation is a critical resource that impacts persons' access to healthcare, education, employment, community engagement, you name it. The recommendation to establish the oversight coordinating entity offers a much-needed step towards addressing the current gaps and inefficiencies in our current transit system. A coordinating entity could serve as a force to ensure that all transit organizations are working collaboratively to meet the diverse needs of riders, including those who rely heavily on accessible transportation. It is disappointing, really disappointing today to see resistance from certain transit organizations. While their concerns should be heard, they must not overshadow the voices of riders who depend on these services and who may have expressed the urgent need for progress and accountability. I hope today that decision makers prioritize the recommendations for a coordinating entity to ensure that the needs of the most vulnerable populations remain central to the conversation. Our community cannot afford any more delays. We progress in creating equitable, accessible, and efficient transportation for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have another public speaker, Mateo Ibarra.
I'm Mateo Ibarra. I'm also a specialty health ambassador. And I'm also I used to go in that BART station a lot to the job over here and a lot of my other jobs. And I learned that transportation is essentially is a right, not a luxury. Yet it feels like this letter is standing in the way of a real improvement. We support the impediment of the recommendations made by the ATSP for coordinating entity. That's all. It was short.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another speaker, Jeremy Dunbar. I think that's the last one.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you for having us today. Transportation is critical and we need solutions that prioritize accessibility for riders. This letter seems more focused on protecting the interests of the organization rather than addressing the needs of the people who rely on these services. Many of us do not have access to paratransit, making the issues even more urgent. I urge you to prioritize and progress and implement the recommendations on the coordinating entity. Riders deserve better and transportation must be accessible for everyone.
All right. Thank you. Do we have any more public comment?
We do not have any more written public
Okay.
or any comments online.
Okay. So we had a couple of suggestions, which was to separation of the review and recommendation. Do I have a movement on that?
I was just going to say we
Motion on that, excuse me.
pull them into the 3 different sections that John was referencing that he felt. So one item is CCTA to be the CE. That's one. And I think the letter that the providers sent said that that was a foregone conclusion or something along those lines. I don't think that's controversial. I think that they have done the grant that Ying is working on, brought over $1 million through that, have spent a ton of Measure J money on the Accessible Strategic Plan, and have brought in matching funds from Measure X from the county, and the county is supportive of this and participating in that and sits on the body. So I don't think I think it's a no-brainer according to what they said and all the other things. So, but that would stand alone, that we support that movement, that the AAC would be the new body so that it would be much broader than just paratransit. And then the third item was the bylaws, which I think what we agreed to is that we want to see the updates that were made from December 2nd to current. We want at least 10 days, but I think probably a month is reasonable so that folks have time to go back to, like you said, Chair Clerk, go back to your boss, your team, your humans, and get the feedback and get them up to date. But I think that we do a meeting in sometime in February, give us 25 days. I don't know how many that is, but something along those lines where we've all had time to review, where Rashida's been able to provide us with all the material and we have time to review it, but that we would have a meeting at that time. My question about that, because I think a motion gets formed after you've heard all the thoughts and we can get more concise, but But does that meeting, because I'm a little confused about the elected official piece. Does that meeting, is the body concerned about bringing in the accessible transportation task force into that meeting? Or are you seeing this as two separate processes? Because I'm just trying to, how do we streamline, make sure everybody's voice is heard, everybody's input is consolidated, and that we have a document that we can all stand behind and say, yes, this works?
Maybe just to address that, because I think the ATSP task force is finished at this point, it's over. So I think it would just be this body would be the one to move forward with it.
So what I'm hearing is that staff will provide the ATSP, the previous document, along with this. And then also, as staff had said, anyone is more than welcome to view those meetings. They're online, you can view them, you can see exactly what's been said, so that when we come back to here, yes, either you feel those comments were addressed or those comments were not addressed. That's part of the comment section of the bylaws. And then for us to, that's part of the reviewing of the bylaws. I guess kind of my question is, do we have a choice? It kind of feels like the PCC is not going to be, it's going to be the AAC. And one of the other comments that I had made or was going to make was, again, there is this commitment, right? And there's certain representatives on the board that are here because they're here, they get the money to provide the services, very happy to be here, do that, they do their claim forms. But this all changes, and that wasn't necessarily part of the, agreement, to get those funds. I don't know how big of an issue that would be, but it is an issue that's floating around in my head. I'm not saying it's an issue for my agency, but I can't speak for every agency, where it's a new commitment, more commitment, different bylaws that those aren't the bylaws that were established to be on the committee to get the funds that you're getting from the Measure J. So it's something else that it's not about necessarily wanting to move forward, but there is an implication to those that are getting those funds, and the agency have said, yep, we'll be on this board, we'll get these funds, we'll do these things, absolutely, we'll take all that feedback, do everything that we can, and then that's kind of changed.
It's in the bylaws. It addresses the Measure J funds in the bylaws and how that's going to, so it is addressed in the bylaws, and that piece of it is carried over into the AAC. What the AAC does is make this body a little more streamlined, a little more representative of everybody, and getting all the voices at the table, but it also increases the jurisdiction to beyond paratransit. Because we can't tell the paratransit providers what they can and cannot do. That's done by Americans with Disabilities Act and the Federal Transportation Authority. So it really is trying to expand the purview to look at how we coordinate and collaborate on a person-centered system that goes above and beyond what the mandates are, but really looks at what the riders' needs are. And those who get Measure J funding don't have to be on this body, but there will still be a process that body approves, just like we went through this last go-round. So that's still built in and baked into it. And I think the request is that we, one, approve or support CCTA being the CE. Two, we approve this body gaining accessible transportation more broadly than just paratransit. And three, we want to look at the bylaws, have time to digest, look at all the feedback, and have another meeting where we come back together and feel like we talk about the nuts and bolts of the bylaws and can agree to them. So those are the three things. Am I missing?
I actually was going to suggest that we break it in two. It seems to me that the designation of 2CTA as the CE is one thing, and the AAC and its bylaws, we're already pretty far down that road, so that could be combined. So my suggestion would be, and understanding that there are still some things to be worked out about the CE and exactly what its responsibilities are and aren't. I know we've been over that a number of times at these meetings, but the conversation isn't really concluded yet, I think. I would suggest we endorse the creation of 2CTA as the CE, and I would suggest that we schedule an opportunity in the near future to review a final set of bylaws. I personally would really like to approve the bylaws and the creation of the CE, therefore inherent in the bylaws, by a straight up or down vote. I think we're going to approve it with the caveat that there are going to be changes that we don't see before the thing goes into effect. Creeps me out. So I would say, let's develop that final version. Let's approve it in, I don't know, a month, whatever, and then call it a day. That would be my suggestion.
And I guess I'm a little unclear, since there is a review and recommend, but again, no vote, how exactly that is done in this process. Terry Ann, do you have any? I was going to say, since there is no vote, but there are some recommendations, how then we move forward with that to see if who is in favor of those recommendations, and that's exactly what we're making, or?
Yeah, well, it sounds like potentially there's maybe two motions on the table here, one from Member Sanderson, one from Member Toth. So we may need to run through both of those unless there's consensus. But you could modify the recommendation if you're willing today to approve the resolution to the authority board for establishment of the authority as the CE. And then secondary to that motion would be to bring back the other two pieces, either as one or combined, for the AAC to become the new, basically sunset the Paratransit Coordinating Council and reestablish the PCC as the AAC, and then also to approve the bylaws at the next meeting.
So yeah, I would like, if it would be possible, to make a motion to approve the CCTA as the coordinating entity. May I have someone make that motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a second by Smith.
So would you like to split it into two different motions and take a vote on each?
Yes.
Okay.
Can we vote on that? Okay.
Member Birdwell?
Yes.
Member Cooney?
Yes.
Member Delgelli? Member Green Roselle? Member Ibarra?
Yes.
Member Nestor Brush?
Yes.
Member Alt Sanderson? Member Alt Tone?
Yes.
Member Reese Brown? Member Sanders? Member Thompson?
Yes.
Member Toth?
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith? And Chair Clark? Thank you. Motion passes unanimously with the majority of members absent. Member Delgelli, Member Reese Brown, and Member Green Roselle. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I believe the second one is to give this body time to review the bylaws, also then to submit comments and to reconvene in 1 month to review and vote.
Just a question or an idea, I don't know. Is this the kind of thing where we might want to do a subcommittee for that month and then come back?
Here's my question. Like, let's say we're reviewing it. Would it be possible, as you're reviewing, to submit questions to staff to then get that information? Or does that all have to be done in a public setting? Because that could also be one way, like if we could do that, submit our questions to staff as we have them, to then get that information, so we have all the information when we come to reconvene? Is that a possibility?
So I actually will ask Rashida to answer the question, but I do want to ask for clarification. I heard comments that the members would like to see the materials ahead in advance. I heard the time frame going from 10 days, 2 weeks, a month. For that reason, And plus the uncertainties of calling for a special meeting in February, because the PCC typically doesn't meet in February. So just want to bring to some more logistic concerns here from staff that with that timeline, with also the request to convene in a month, I don't think we have enough days on the calendar.
Is it something then we could do in the March meeting? Because we do have a March scheduled PCC meeting.
Yes, that is a regular scheduled meeting.
I think the request was for a special meeting in February where we could crunch through this. So subcommittee, I don't think we need to develop, but this would be a special meeting. This would not be a regular standing meeting. This would be a meeting where the PCC convened to review the bylaws, go over questions, concerns. They would then be taken by Rashida, incorporated into the final document where it could be presented at the next PCC meeting and we can move forward.
Yeah, that's why I heard a special meeting in February. I'm wondering if staff can go back and look at the calendar, because there's also a request to make the information available range from 2 weeks to 1 month at a time. I'm just sharing that I think we're running out of days on the calendar.
So if I understand correctly, and that would be my recommendation, call a special meeting specifically for this. We will send the information within the next couple of days for it to be reviewed. Instead of a subcommittee, this entire committee will have a chance to take a look at it and provide comments prior to a special meeting, and then we will update it based on your comments so that you see a final version at the special meeting. Once the final version has been submitted in the special meeting, then what we could do on the March PCC meeting, is that you can move to approve it based on everybody's input. That will fall more in line with the process that we felt was neglected with the ATSP. So it gives this body not just a subcommittee who then has to bring it to other individuals, because the subcommittee is just 2 or 3 folks. But this gives an opportunity for the entire committee to take a look at it. And then I'll defer to Terry Ann whether or not, if we do a special meeting in February, that does not give an entire 30 days to review it for us to be able to post it. It gives approximately 2 weeks. But that means that all comments will have to be brought in 2 weeks so that we can post it.
And I think what we're hearing is, can staff do that? Can staff to make that schedule?
I think I just expressed the concern about we're running out of days on the calendar.
We can present some days that will work for the body. I mean, if we could do that now with everyone here, that would be appreciated. If we were to look at, I don't know, Rashida, like the 17th or the 24th of February, 3 to 4 weeks from now, would that work? Because the next meeting would be on March 17th, which would essentially be, 3 to 4 weeks later.
February 17th is a
that's,
holiday.
That is. So we're looking at the 24th, unless we wanted to go to another day than Monday. Is there availability on the 24th at 2 p.m.?
The 24th.
Does that work for you, Rashida?
One moment, please. The 24th.
That would be 3 weeks before the next meeting, which would give about a week and a half or so to turn it around and get a packet out, maybe 2 weeks.
It works for me. If we can get PCC members to.
Do we want to make that part of the motion? Okay. February 20, the special meeting called for February 24th at 2 p.m. And that will go over the
bylaws,
a final draft, and then the final bylaws would be brought back to the regular meeting on March 17th, as well as the second part of the motion, which would also be to review and approve the final draft bylaws, as well as establishing the AAC and sunsetting the PCC. And then this body would be sunsetted by another meeting of the PCC. So it wouldn't just so everyone's aware, March 17th wouldn't be the final meeting unless that was incorporated into that item, where it's a secondary item on that agenda. Otherwise, it would come back to a future meeting to actually sunset the body.
I'd like to maybe keep that separate because I don't think that we can look into the future to make, I'm not sure everything that's going to be said. So my thought off the top of my head is to keep those separate, the sunsetting of the PCC versus.
Until there's final adopted approval, and there'd be additional meeting.
Until we've adopted and approved bylaws of the new committee before sunsetting the current one.
Yeah. Yes, and it would allow annual funding, resolutions to be continued to be adopted and ensure the funding until the official first meeting of the AAC were to take place upon approval. And then, of course, it would have to go back to the board as well as to our planning committee and our administration projects committee.
Okay. So the motion to be made is to provide comments and questions to staff. That will then be presented on February 24th for the bylaws to be reviewed, further comments, and then the final bylaws to be presented at the March 17th meeting.
Yes, with all final comments incorporated from the special meeting.
Motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thompson makes the motion. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
And we have a Toth second.
Okay, I'll call roll. Member Birdwell? Member Cooney?
Yes.
Member Dowjelly? Member Green Roselle? Member Ibarra?
Yes.
Member Nestor Brush?
Yes.
Member Alt Sanderson?
Yes.
Member Alt Tone?
Yes.
Member Reese Brown? Member Sanders?
Yes.
Member Thompson?
Yes.
Member Toth?
Yes.
Vice Chair Smith?
Yes.
Chair Clark?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with a majority of members present, with Dowjelly absent, Green Roselle absent, and Member Reese Brown. Member Cooney has stepped out, or Member Birdwell, I'm sorry, has stepped out.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
concludes our. Sorry.
Thank you
That concludes
very
our
much.
regular agenda items. We do have reports. If I could jump down just to see if there's any, I know we've talked about it a lot, but I'll jump down for those that have to leave. Are there any future agenda items to be considered?
Yeah, we did talk about having a presentation on technology that writers can use. I think, John, you were going to do a presentation on County Connection Links software, no? Am I misremembering?
Wasn't this about the text to
Yeah.
text? So,
The
so
way
I
to
know,
I actually have
communicate.
an update about that I was going to give under
Oh, I thought we
correspondence
were
and
going to get a
communications.
whole, intro to that.
It was-
Okay.
Yeah, no,
My
it was just a,
misunderstanding.
for the different transit agencies, just to report on ways that you could book transportation.
My
was-
misunderstanding.
Was that. Okay, well then maybe I'll just go down the line. Reports. East Bay Paratransit Access Committee. Does anybody who attended one of the most recent East Bay Paratransit Access Committee meetings have a report or anything to say?
Thank you, Mallory Brush,
Yes.
Manager of Accessible Services. We did have our EPAC meeting on January 7th. We go over a broker report, so we have all the KPIs that we review with our committee. We also present Driver of the Month for the past 3 months. That's always fun. And they range from drivers at 6 months up to 18 years, so it's a phenomenal spread. We had a great presentation by Drennan Shelton on the Transformation Action Plan. There are 5 actions at the regional level, designating mobility managers in each county, funding additional one-seat ride pilots, integration of the PT services into Clipper 2. There's a pilot scheduled with SFMTA. We have formed a working group to identify paratransit challenges and recommend reforms. And the fifth is standardized eligibility practices. This was accepted by the Regional Network Management Council for implementation in 2025. So that's all the transit operators in the Bay Area agreeing to standardize paratransit eligibility. We also had a brief discussion of the upcoming regional measure that is intended to be on the ballot in 2026 for future transportation funding. And also an update, we are implementing new software platform with Spare Labs. We are on a legacy platform, Stratogen, the only one. Everybody else in the Bay Area is on Trapeze. We're moving to Spare Labs, which is advanced technology for us and more user-friendly and user ability to book via website, via text, etc. So that's my report.
Thank you. Touches on a lot of what we were just talking about. Appreciate it. Senior Mobility Action Council? No, he was last meeting, but I don't believe Jim Donnelly's on Zoom.
I believe that Jim Donnelly has handed off the torch to Candace Evans to be the chair of the Senior Mobility Action Council. I was not at the last meeting, but I will follow up with Jim to make sure that he lets Candace know that he shows up at this meeting to provide the report, and it would be really great if she could do the same.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I know that they're still collecting data on lessons learned from the pandemic in transportation, so that much I can tell you. Thanks.
Thank you. Correspondence and communications. We don't have any correspondence in the packet. Future agenda items. Did you say that you were gonna?
Just under communications, I wanted
Under communications, I apologize.
No worries. I just wanted to give a little update to the rest of the committee and those in attendance. Last meeting, we had a really moving and impassioned public comment from someone who was pointing out that County Connection did not have a way to, a text-based way to reserve paratransit rides. We're not quite there yet, but we are moving ahead with implementing both cell phone text and also like an online chat option for reservations. Hopefully, by the time we're back at our next regular meeting, that will be up and running. And so, yeah, thanks to that public commenter from last time for pointing it out, and we're moving ahead with a solution. So should be good stuff coming soon.
Also, just for the city of San Pablo, we're looking to upgrade our software. We're lucky enough to have been able to get some funds to upgrade that software, and that software is doing talk to text and will also allow people to text in their reservations. We have looked into it with IT. It's actually incredibly expensive, and I don't need to get into all of that, but we are looking to that. So looking to upgrade, I mean, within the next 4 to 5 months so that people can text in. They can email right now, but they can text from their phone any reservations that they want to do. And then hopefully this will also help us do, which we don't currently do, which is same-day reservations. So I know that that has helped a lot of people as well, especially when you're working with that technology. So anything else on that? Thank you.
I appreciate both of those updates, and I'm going to share particularly the County Connection information with the public commenter from our last meeting. I think I would like to ask that we kind of keep it on the radar for this group, not next, I mean, we've got a couple other things we're dealing with for a minute here in the next couple meetings, but to keep it on the radar, especially as maybe San Pablo's is up and running, and I think also County Connection, you're moving ahead, so there's some sort of future date that maybe you'll have
It'll be within the next couple of months.
Great.
I just don't want to give a precise date when I don't know it, but yeah, I think as Jean just said, it turns out that this is actually surprisingly complicated and expensive when you try and do it. We are moving ahead with a solution that I think will work really, really well. And that'll be, in the next couple of months, that'll be online.
And I wonder how this Optimat thing might play into that mix. So I think for now, I'd just like to ask that we keep it on our radar and maybe circle back within the next few months to think about it further.
I mean, we could put something on the agenda that's just technology and, you know, access updates and put that on there, and anybody that has anything that they want to, you know, report on that. Obviously, agenda items, I think we have a pretty full slate moving forward with those, so I don't know if anybody else has something burning that they want to make sure goes on the agenda for the March 17th meeting. Okay. Deanna, have we received any written in-person or remote public comments about future agenda items?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay. I just want to say thank you all for your comments, for hanging in there with everybody. This concludes our meeting, and it is adjourned at 4:15.